Welcome to Raaonline. I am Dr. Rajapriya, Professor of Anatomy. Today we are going to discuss about joints of thumb. Objectives of this session. At the end of this session, you must be able to describe the first carpo-metacarpal joint, metacarpophalangeal joint of thumb, interphalangeal joint of thumb, and discuss the movements of thumb and the muscles producing them. This is carpo-metacarpal joint of thumb. You can see the wrist joint here, hand here, okay. This is the radius bone and this is the ulna bone. This is the distal end of radius and this is the distal end of ulna. And you can see the set of carpal bones, a proximal row of carpal bones, 4 carpal bones are there and the distal row of 4 carpal bones are there. From lateral to medial, the proximal row of carpal bones can be called as, this is the scaphoid bone. This bone is the scaphoid. This bone is lunate. And this bone is triquetral. And over triquetral, you have pisiform. These 4 bones are the proximal row of carpal bones. Now you have the distal row of carpal bones. They can be called as from lateral to medial side. This bone is the trapezium. This bone is called as trapezoid. This bone is called as capitate. And the medial most carpal bone is called as hamate. So, how many carpal bones we saw? We saw 8 carpal bones which are arranged in 2 rows, a proximal row and the distal row. Proximal row bones, this bone is called as scaphoid and this bone is called as lunate and this bone is called as triquetral. Over triquetral you have one more bone called as pisiform bone. And the distal row of 4 bones from lateral to medial side, they are called as trapezium, trapezoid, capitate and hamate. These are the carpal bones. And coming to the metacarpal bones, this is the first metacarpal and this one is the second metacarpal, third metacarpal, fourth and fifth metacarpal. I will show you now. This is the first metacarpal, this is the second metacarpal, third, fourth and fifth metacarpal. They will be numbered from lateral to medial side. Now, our carpo-metacarpal joint of thumb is formed by the trapezium and the first metacarpal. So, carpo-metacarpal joint of thumb is nothing but articulation between the trapezium bone and the first metacarpal bone. Okay, shall we proceed to the next slide? So, there is an articulation between those 2 bones. Whenever we study about articulation, we have to know what type of joint it is. Since movements are highly possible, greater mobility is present in thumb, it is a synovial joint and it is a biaxial joint because movements will occur across 2 directions. Flexion, extension, adduction, abduction will occur. It is a biaxial joint and depending upon the shape of the articular surfaces, it is called a saddle joint. See, the shape of the articular surface will be concavo-convex on one side and reciprocally it will be concavo-convex on the other side. So, this shape is called a saddle shape and this is the type of joint present in our first carpo-metacarpal joint. See, this is a Pringles. The shape of a Pringle, the chips is saddle shape. Similarly, the shape of our bone, the trapezium will be in this shape and the corresponding articular surface will be in this shape to articulate with it and this shape is called a saddle shape. So, the type of joint present in first carpo-metacarpal joint is, it is a synovial joint and it is a biaxial joint and it belongs to the saddle shaped variety. Okay, we'll proceed to the next slide. Coming to the articular ends, whenever we read a joint, we have to know what are the articular surfaces. Proximally and distally, what are the articular ends? Proximally, as I already told you in the previous slide, it is a trapezium. To be more specific, the distal articular surface of trapezium. Distal articular surface of trapezium will articulate with the base of first metacarpal. Proximal articular surface of first metacarpal bone. So, the articular ends are proximally distal articular surface of trapezium and distally by the proximal articular surface of base of first metacarpal bone. Okay, these are the articular ends. We'll move to the next slide. Coming to the ligaments of first metacarpal joint. Whenever we study a joint, we have to study the ligaments. These ligaments maintain the stability of the joint. Okay. See, capsule of the first carpo-metacarpal joint is very thick and it is loose fibrous sac and encloses the joint cavity. We have to know its attachments. Proximally it is attached to trapezium. This is trapezium and distally it is attached to the base of first metacarpal bone. To be more specific, proximally it is attached to the margins of articular surface of trapezium and distally it is attached to the circumference of the base of first metacarpal bone. You can see this is the first metacarpal bone and this one is the trapezium. This one is a trapezium. So, this is the trapezium, this is the first metacarpal bone. You can very well see the capsule here. And the inner surface of this capsule will be lined by synovial membrane which secretes synovial fluid for the lubrication of the joint and to prevent friction. Coming to the accessory ligaments. Whenever we have to read the accessory ligaments, it will be present both on the dorsal aspect as well as on the palmar aspect as well as on the lateral aspect. See, this is the palmar aspect of the first carpo-metacarpal joint and this is the dorsal aspect of first carpo-metacarpal joint. Now, on the palmar aspect, see, you can see AOL. This AOL is nothing but anterior oblique ligament or otherwise called as palmar ligament of carpo-metacarpal joint. Coming to the dorsal aspect, between the trapezium and the first metacarpal, you can see the dorsal ligament or the POL or posterior oblique ligament which extends from the posterior aspect of the trapezium to the first metacarpal. Okay, so we have read dorsal ligament and we have read palmar ligament. Now coming to the lateral ligament. Lateral ligament will be on the lateral aspect of the joint. See, this is the joint between trapezium and the first metacarpal. This is the lateral aspect. Between the lateral aspect of the trapezium and between the lateral margin of the first metacarpal, base of the first metacarpal, there is a ligament which is called as lateral ligament or otherwise called as dorso-radial ligament. Okay. Yes, dorsal posterior oblique ligament.